Right, let's chat about the UK-US battle over Bombardier and what that means for UK-US trade going forward in future. So Bombardier, or Bombardier as Jeremy Corbyn recently pronounced it, is a Canadian company that started in 1942 with snowmobiles, but then since 1986 when it acquired Canadair, went into aerospace, and it employs over 4,000 people in Northern Ireland putting this together. And the complaint was that there had been a lot of subsidies going into the production of new aircraft, and Boeing were challenging that. America has now said that it will slap on 220% tariffs, meaning that a lot of these jobs in Northern Ireland are jeopardised. This is despite Theresa May, who held Donald Trump's hand, having personally asked him not to allow these kind of measures to go through. So I was at Labour conference a few days back that had a session about trade with Trump. And this was one of the questions asked, what this new battle means. And one of the panellists, Jude Curtin-Darling, MEP, who actually used to work in representing British Steel before, told me the story, which I've now looked up and researched, of in 2002 and 2003, when George W. Bush put illegal tariffs on steel coming into the US. And this hurt high-grade UK steel, but also the threat that it would mean then Chinese steel would be diverted to Europe was a secondary threat as well. The EU and some other countries took together the issue to the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization ruled in 2003 that the American tariffs were illegal. America, George W. Bush, decided to ignore that and keep them going anyway. At this stage, the Brits were trying to convince America through our special relationship to drop the tariffs, which were quite clearly illegal tariffs by that stage. America wouldn't. And it's interesting to read a Daily Mail article from the time in which you had a certain Digby Jones, now Brexiteer Lord Digby Jones, saying free trade is global free trade, not American free trade. And the article was also demanding that the EU actually do something, show it has teeth, show it can protect British steel. Well, the EU did. They threatened to put tariffs on some very politically sensitive products coming out of the States. The most notable example was oranges from Florida, which had been the swing state in the 2000 election, and this was in December 2003, so elections were coming up next year, and George W. Bush backed down immediately. So all of this goes to show that the world of trade is very hostile. There are three large players in it that tend to set the rules, and those are America, the EU and China. At the moment, we've got Defence Secretary Michael Fallon threatening some kind of trade war with the US over this, threatening that Boeing may not get contracts. But the question remains to be seen, do we really have leverage with the US? This brings us onto the UK-US trade deal. There was an attempted trade deal between the US and the EU called TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. One of the reasons why that fell through was because of American agricultural and food standards that it wanted to force on Europe. And the EU countries were saying, no, we have our own high quality standards. It only came up on the radar for Britain because of issues relating to the NHS, when all the other countries actually protected their health services, and how that factored into the Brexit debate. But a lot of other countries were far ahead on this, and if America would not back down on trying to roll back the standards on food and agriculture and chemicals with something the size of the EU market, why would it do so with us? If we are separate and a lot smaller, America has additional incentive to get us to drop our standards, something that Michael Gove and Theresa May said would never do, but they have extra incentive to force us to drop our standards, because then that is one step further to making the whole world accept American standards. So we are something of a pawn in a game here if we are to come out and desperately seek a deal with the US. And you can see how aggressively they're prepared to behave. You know that Donald Trump has come out with an America First policy, and that is absolutely what he would ram through, and absolutely what people like Liam Fox are quite happy for us to receive at this end. And as for promises by our government that we would not drop standards, you cannot trust those promises, of course, and it could quite easily be restated by Michael Gove in the future. Oh no, we haven't dropped standards at all. In fact, I don't think you realise how high American standards really are. You have to look at it from the consumer. You can see how this could get peddled to be misrepresentative of what you and I would currently regard as high standards in production and in products. And so in a way, this current incident has been a reminder of the risks that we run up against if we are to come out of the customs union. And if we want global trade, it is certainly better to achieve that end through the collective bargaining power of all 28 EU countries together. And when there are disputes, in order to have that backup mechanism of the 500 million of us together, rather than the UK being alone, playing against larger entities.